Good afternoon from wherever you guys are today. My name is Chris Doyle with Goodman Games, and I'd like to welcome everybody to Crypt of the Devil Lich Live. So for hopefully you Goodman Games fans that are aware, we are running a Kickstarter right now for the 5th edition and DCC conversion editions of Crypt of the Devil Lich. So if you guys are interested, go check that Kickstarter out right now. For the next hour, we're going to bring in a bunch of special guests to kind of talk about some of the original history of the Crypt of the Devil Lich. We've got some really cool Blast from the Past folks here, and we've got some new faces too to kind of show off what we're doing with this particular Kickstarter. So I welcome everybody for the journey. It's going to be a little bit of a walk down memory lane. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat for us and we'll try and get them. If you have any specific questions for any of our special guests, that's fine too. We'll try and get to them before they pop in and pop out. Our first guest is the Dark Master himself, Joe Goodman. So Thorin, our producer, is going to fade him in.
Whoa.
So welcome.
Hey Chris.
Joe. So
how's it going?
It's a pleasure to see you. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. Actually, I need to get my we've got hold on just 1 second. I need to get my chat fired up. Okay, we're all good. Welcome, and thank you for agreeing to republish a classic module. Crypt of the Devil Lich was first put together in 2004 for 3rd edition or 3.5 edition, I believe it was. It came out. It was released as a published module as DCC number 13. This is even before the DCC RPG. Joe obviously acted as the publisher back then. He's obviously the publisher now, and my boss, I might add. And I have to gush about this right at my very first day of work back in August. My first assignment was to start converting Crypt of the Devil Lich, which was really cool. Obviously, very near and dear to my heart. Because I was involved in the very first one back in 2004, so kind of coming full circle here is definitely very exciting. So welcome, Joe. So where are you coming from? Where are you zooming from right now?
This is my home office. I mean, I think we're all working from home now in some capacity. So,
but where is that in the world?
Oh, good question. I live in California, a little bit in San Francisco, in a place called Marin County.
All right, so we're at San Francisco area, California. I'd love to find out when we're doing these stream things, like where everybody's from. Yesterday, I ran a Crypt of the Devil Lich game, and I had a guy from Germany, a guy from Toronto, California, Cincinnati. It's great. It's just like really awesome to do that. So I'm gonna walk you down memory lane. And think, do you remember Valdosta, Georgia?
That's right. I drove down
2003.
Because you were there for something like a
So let me remind you, 2003 Thanksgiving, I was visiting my folks in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, which is about 3 hours south of Valdosta, Georgia. You lived at that point outside of Atlanta, about 3 hours north of Valdosta, Georgia, and we both jumped in our vehicles, drove, and met at a Irish pub, if you recall. Next to a game store.
Yes.
Yeah, Guinness Stew. Oh my God, the Guinness Stew was amazing. We played a little card game called Geek Wars that you were getting ready to publish. Right. Yeah. And we talked about, you said, hey, I want to do a tournament module at Gen Con, which was at that point 7 months away, 8 months away, probably 9 months away. And we talked about laying the foundation for Crypt of the Devil Lich. So I remember that meeting. So
I think you had come by our booth, I think at Origins maybe the year before.
Yes, exactly.
And I feel like you actually had a resume, as I recall, and it listed all this like RPGA like tournament experience or sort of RPGA organizational experience. And I remember thinking like, oh, this guy might be able to pull off a tournament. Like that's got to require organization.
That is exactly it. And I remember you gave me an assignment to do, which ended up being DCC 7. But then you were really like, yeah, I'll let you do this book thing. But really, I want to talk about the tournament stuff because you wanted to do a tournament back then. And you laid out your vision to me. You were like, I want it to be, you said, I wanted to be a Devil Lich in it. And you're like, I don't care anything else. You just said Devil Lich. And I was like, wow, okay. and
That's
that
funny.
was
I
what
don't
I had
remember
to
that
work
being
off
my
of.
idea. I remember that being not my idea,
No,
somebody else's idea.
no,
That's
that
funny.
was your idea. Well, I don't know where you got it from. Maybe you got it from somebody else. So,
Yeah.
but so the cool part about Crypt of the Devil Lich, the original one, is we had a bunch of different authors all write killer encounters, and then they all sent them to me, and I put them all together into this dungeon. I built the dungeon basically. I laid it all out on my basement floor. And you actually was one of the. I remember when you said, "Here, I'm going to send you a whole bunch of people, and they're going to write encounters for you." I said, "Well, hey, well, wait a minute now." I'm like, "You're going to write an encounter too," and you were like, "Okay," and you did. So tell us about your encounters that you wrote.
Yeah, I was just telling Chris, I mean, it's been like 15 years since I wrote these. So I was going back through the adventure just now, reminding myself of what I wrote. I remember the Room of the Prophets, the Hall of the Prophets. I mean, I'm reading it now and I'm thinking, man, that's creepy. Like, what
Very.
inspired that? And for those of you who haven't read it, it's a cathedral shaped room, thousands of feet long, hundreds of feet wide, filled with thousands of prophets. So people telling the future one way or the other, most of them crippled and chained to the floor because the Devil Lich likes to keep her prophets close. And she would walk the floor every day and listen to their collective prophecies of the future. And if there's common themes, that are in the air, that gives her the ability to kind of get a sense of what's coming down the pike in the world. But yeah, man, reading it again, it's really creepy. I just remember I've always liked designing rooms that have like ambiance or atmosphere, and that one is like all ambiance and not much more encounter beyond that. It's just exploration of this strange room.
Yeah, and I'll add right now, a terrible tournament encounter, by the way, absolutely terrible. But back then, and Andy and Dan, they know exactly what I'm talking about when I pull them up next. It's like, but you know what? When the publisher gives you an encounter, I was scared not to use it, so it went in there. So I feel a lot more confident with myself now. So I actually created an additional room that works a lot better for the tournament, for the 5e conversion, and for the DCC conversion. So because if you read that original module, that original
it's
encounter,
completely open-ended, like for purposes of the tournament
exactly.
where you want some sort of structure and focus and
Terrible.
and rules for adjudicating. There's like 1,000 possible ways to go in there.
Yep, it is terrible.
Yeah.
So absolutely terrible. And so like I said though, but the only reason, if anybody else would have submitted that encounter, it would have gotten thrown out. But I was like, Joe submitted it, and I'm like, well, this one's kind of keeping. And I've had people tell me, why is that encounter in there? And I was like, did you see who wrote it? It's like, you tell them it can't be in there. That's awesome. So I hear you did another encounter too.
Yeah, it's funny. In the book, I was credited with 3, and we were just discussing this, and I was rereading them. And one of them, I'm like, did I write that? And Chris, tell him what you told me.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he didn't. I think I just threw an extra credit his way. So it was basically a doorway, the final door going into Chalychia's room, and then I actually threw a clue in it. But yeah, I don't remember you writing that one. I'm pretty sure I wrote it. And then I think when we were getting ready to do the credits of the book, I was like, no, just put Joe down for that. I'll make it look a little bit better. So I've already done my 3. So.
But the other one that I did was the Hall of the Pit Traps that has, basically poisonous gas in the walls, or coming out of the walls, 2 pit traps. I remember because I also did this in DCC number 3, the Mysterious Tower. I had this like obsession for a while with pit traps, mostly because D&D's gotten to the point where players always anticipate them. So there's always a 10-foot pole. I mean, I'm sure in Gygax's era, the 10-foot pole was like a major evolution in dungeon exploring, where somebody figured that out. You could tap it along, and then they started doing it. But by the time you get here, it's like standard operating equipment. So I got into this mindset of like, they're going to have a 10-foot pole. Therefore, any competent dungeon designer, on the monster/evil NPC side, is going to work under the assumption that they can detect pit traps. So I have a number of encounters that I've set up over the years that involve like, there is a pit trap that's clearly detectable, and then they're probably going to jump over it, and then it's that jumping action that triggers the second pit trap. So this encounter, I was just rereading it. This one's fun. Like they discover the first one. Then if they try to get around it, if they go in the walls, they set off the poison gas. If they jump over it, they land on the second one, which has a drop and then a timed release of a second drop. And then they go into a gelatinous cube and then slowly sink to the bottom. That one's fun.
Momentum when you're wearing plate mail armor is not a cool thing in that regard, because it's like a 200-foot drop, and it's like there's plenty of speed to pick up there, and you don't just land on the top of the cube, you go right into that sucker. And it's like, and that is, let me tell you, even 15th level characters, that's terrifying for a character to like plunge 20 or 30 feet into a gelatinous cube and be like, well, now I'm paralyzed and I can't get out, and nobody else is near me. Oh, and the lid just shut above me. It's like, yeah, it's like, and then the clock starts ticking. So it's beautiful.
And it's like visceral. Like when you mark off hit points of damage, you don't feel it. But when you think about being suffocated or, or being enclosed, like people actually respond and feel that more than just marking off another 6 hit points of damage.
Definitely, without a doubt. So here's my next question. Tell me about the Pluto pad.
Yes. Yeah. Man, that was a long time ago. But when I was in Atlanta, and I went to school and went to high school in Atlanta and grew up there. And I was friends with a lot of kids in high school who are mostly one grade below me. For whatever reason, that's the group of kids that I hung out with. And so we ended up gaming together. And when I moved back to Atlanta, there was a new guy in the crowd, Stephen Pelliser, who didn't go to high school with us, but had made friends with some of the guys, over the intervening years. And he and Alan and one other fellow had gotten an apartment. I don't know why they called it the Pluto pad. For some reason, they called it the Pluto. I guess I never really heard that story. Anyway, they had an apartment called the Pluto pad. It was a house. 3 guys staying there. And because they were the, 3 guys without spouses or girlfriends, it was the house that could be messy and used as, gaming central. So they had this huge dining room table, which basically got used for gaming. And that's all we ever used it for. And like, you could just leave all your gaming stuff out and nobody cared, which is, now that I'm more civilized, I realize that doesn't often happen in houses. That was great. But yeah, we would go over there. What was it? Thursday nights, I think. I forget. And it was just a really fun, it's one of those moments in my gaming career where there's a lot of regular gaming, it comes and goes in terms of the life cycle of your gaming career, but how much you get a stable group and a group that you really connect with and so on. But I got to see if I can remember everybody. I think I have a photo in the module, but it was me, my brother, Mike, Alan, Steven, Garrett.
Hopefully Thorne will pull that photo up actually.
Oh, really? The other Steven, I think Ben Rhodes was still there. Am I missing anybody? I feel like that's all of us. Yeah.
All right.
It was, it was a great time. And that's where the Dragon Mech campaign setting came from. That was like my homebrew at the time.
Wow.
But then, we took a couple weeks off. I feel like it took like at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 sessions to do Crypt of the Devil Lich, but we took a while off to play test that. And that was a lot of fun.
And you went through the entire thing, right? You got all the way to the end.
Oh, all the way to the end. Yeah. I was just rereading my notes because 4 of the 6 PCs died in the final encounter. And when there's the photo. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So, and I'd forgotten this. 2 of the PCs were at 0 strength, and I think being like dragged into the, in a sack or something. The final, and I think there was like a wand of bull strength or ring of bulls, some sort of bull strength involved. So it would constantly get them from 0 to like +4 strength, and they could walk, and then they'd collapse when it ran out. It was just really fun.
That's fun with third edition mechanics there. They got rid of all that in 5th edition. So
yeah.
Awesome. That's cool. So why convert to 5e and DCC? What was your impetus behind that?
Yeah, in general, I don't like going back to the redoing things that we did before, because I don't know. It's just I'm not a big fan of it. I'd rather just do something new and interesting. But this is one of those adventures that people continue to talk about. Not just us, not just the original playtesters and the original groups, but it's just got a great reputation. It went through 2 printings back in the day, and then 4E came along and so on. But it was always just a very popular, very classic adventure, and it's the kind you can't just recreate. I mean, that process of having every designer only design 1 or 2 or 3 rooms, and then somebody stitch them together into a master dungeon, really does mean that every encounter is unique and memorable, and in many cases multi-layered. Like there's several things going on. And you don't get a lot of dungeons like that. Most dungeons are designed by 1 or maybe 2 people, and you just, unless you work on it for years, you just peter out of ideas eventually. This dungeon, every room is like 3, 4, 5 really interesting ideas sort of packaged into one space, and every encounter is special. So yeah, I think it deserves to have more people see it. It's a shame that the way D&D mechanics work, you sort of retire the older stuff when the new mechanics come along, and this is one that should just keep being seen, I think.
Great. Excellent. Can you give us any hints about what might happen with the Kickstarter soon? We're almost done with all of our stretch goals. Any little tidbits you can get us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Chris and I have been talking. It's really cool, the response and the enthusiasm from the fans. And we've been discussing like what additional stretch goals we should have. So it sounds like there's a lot of enthusiasm for more pre-gens. If you want to try a different variation on the pre-gens, or after your first party's wiped out, bring in the second party. More handouts. I mean, we already cleared, I think, 20 handouts more or something like that.
Yep.
But maybe do a folio of them. So they're, you traditionally have to photocopy it, but actually let's just make them handouts. You handwrite out. That's one way to do it. And there are a lot of other cool ideas too. So yeah, We got it.
Awesome.
We'll put something together soon for the backers to see it all, but it's really cool to see the enthusiasm.
Great. Well, Joe, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate it. I know you're very, very busy with the convention. You're jumping from stream to stream and all kinds of stuff, and hopefully you get some time to, have a normal weekend as well at points here and there. But thank you very much. We're going to say goodbye to Joe.
Thanks, Chris.
And we're going to bring our next guest up, which is Andy Brogan. There's going to be a little bit of a transition here. All right, we are back, and I am joined now by Andy Brogan. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Doing great. So where are you zooming from? What part of the country?
Cincinnati, Ohio, and it's sunny out for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, you guys got snow on the ground out there?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. We still do in the Northeast, so it's like good to hear. So for those folks who don't know, Andy was one of the original tournament players back in 2004. So if anybody wants some hints on how to get through the module, he's probably a good guy to hit up. Andy, first, give us a little bit of a thumb sketch of you. When did you start playing D&D?
Pretty much, I think freshman year in high school, back in the early 80s. Cut my teeth on basic D&D and advanced, and played all the way through to the 90s on first edition. We kind of skipped 2E, and then we just followed. I guess we had enough of that by 2000, 2001, so we went to the 3.0, 3.5, fourth edition, Pathfinder. Now we're on fifth edition.
Great, excellent.
Yeah.
And how did you and your group find out about the DCC tourney?
Well,
Gen Con?
Yeah, no problem. So back then, I was the guy in charge of getting all the tickets to all the events. So I would leaf through the Gen Con catalog and try to get in as much cool stuff as I could. And it was kind of a shotgun approach, hit and miss. We didn't know anything about Goodman Games at all.
Not many people did back in 2004.
Right. So we show up and, I have all these tickets I'm handing out, and we have a group of like 6 to 9 people that would go every year. So my buddy and I, we took the Goodman's tournament, and other people took some other events. So that's kind of how we got there. But when we played that first round, it was amazing. I feel that there was always a dearth of modules for 3.0 and 3.5, and having Goodman's come along with their line of modules, it was awesome. But the tournament was great. So we got into a game with 4 other guys who knew each other. So we were, playing with those guys, had a wonderful time in the tournament.
Excellent. Do you remember? Do you have any favorite memories of either the pre-gens or some of the encounters? Anything that just stuck out with you all these years later?
There's quite a bit. I guess the thing that tickles me is I was playing a Grige, which is the dwarven cleric, and my big thing was like avoiding encounters if I could, or bypassing danger. So we got to this one room and it looked horrible. There was something we had to cross and no one wanted to go out there. So I said, you know what? I got a potion of flying. I'll just drink the potion of flying and I'll just carry everybody across. So we bypassed that room, which was cool. And so that's how we got our team name. We were Brotherhood of the Flying Dwarf for the rest of the tournament, which is kind of neat that they liked that idea so much.
Yeah, it was funny. Yesterday when we were playing in our game, In the pre-planning stages via email exchange by the players, they foolishly included me while they were doing all their pre-planning. And they were talking about who they were going to make fly, and they were like, oh, we should have the Dwarven Cleric fly. And I said, there was a very famous tournament group named the Brotherhood of the Flying Dwarf. I'm like, and they did very well in the tournament, and maybe that's because they had, they got the dwarf up in the air, and definitely an advantage, because there's a disadvantage to moving around. This module is all about tactics and moving, and like you said, sometimes it's just better to avoid an encounter at one time. And don't worry, we've added a couple of extra things in 5th edition to make avoiding encounters a little bit trickier. So
as long as there's a mechanic there, because you got to reward creativeness, I think.
Yes, that's what we go for. We did not break the rules. If you I've been doing a deep dive of the Tome of Horrors, and there were some times where Gygax blatantly changed rules or ignored rules just to like hose people. We didn't do that. Now, we didn't also create the game. So, I mean, Gary's got that ability to get away with that, and no one's going to say anything, but we did try to keep it within the framework and everything. So, but that's great. Excellent. That fantastic. Anything else that you want to add to our wonderful crowd out there listening on?
Well, I'll tell you what, this is going back to 2004, 2005, but I've been a big fan of Goodman Games, and we would always try to get into the tournaments and events, and they always sell out. They're so much fun. They're the opposite of a vanilla adventure. It's you gotta think. They throw things at you. Having a monk vampire. I mean, who would have thought of putting a monk in a vampire template? That's one of the first encounters, I think, if I remember correctly. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was just great. A good experience. So yeah, I play DCC now, play a little MCC with my kids. So I still try to stay in touch with all that. And the COVID thing stinks. There's nothing better than going to the Goodman's booth at Origins or Gen Con and seeing all the new stuff they have and everything, meeting the DMs and all that. But I highly recommend getting into a Goodman's event at a con if you can. It's a wonderful experience.
Great. Well, thank you. We appreciate those kind words. That's awesome. And it was, when we found Andy, we just went through our mailing list and looked for names that we recognized from the tournament. And Andy's was one that popped up. And I emailed a bunch of people and I said, hey, I'm like, anybody interested in jumping on? Andy's like, I'd love to jump on for a couple minutes. So Andy, thank you very much. Thanks for giving us that little snippet of 2004. You be well and be safe. And I'm hopefully we'll see you again in person at one of these conventions, either Origins or Gen Con, coming up soon.
I'm counting on it. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you, Andy. So we will be back in a moment. All right, we are back live, and my next guest is Dan Adams. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Dan is again another one of our 2004 Crypt of the Devil Lich tournament players. First of all, Dan, where are you zooming from today? I want to know, where in the country are you at?
Well, actually, we used to live in the Cincinnati area, so we were from same area that Andy was, but live in Berea, Kentucky right now.
Oh, excellent. So, no snow on the ground down there, right?
Not currently.
Okay, not currently, but you did have some though this year.
We did, which again was a rarity.
Okay. So yeah, I know. Yeah, well, that was what happened a couple weeks ago in Texas, and that was crazy. So, Well, thanks for joining us again. So tell me a little bit. So you were part of Clan Yeoman. Now, you guys were one of the more prepared teams out there. You guys used to practice ahead of time on your mechanics and stuff. We used to, when we did these tournaments back in the day, we used to give the characters out about 2 weeks before the tournament. And from what I understand, you guys used to get those pre-gens, and you guys used to actually run adventures through them and whatnot. Is that correct? Did you guys
that is correct. We would scour the character sheets, because you also had some of the tournaments where you could pick which ones you wanted to play.
Yep.
So we were scouring the character sheets to see what special items, see what spells they had, and we always tried to pick ones that we said, this might be available to bypass an encounter or make an encounter easier. So we were very selective about our characters. So this was a process for us every single year, because after playing the first tournament, we said, okay, this is a mainstay in our Gen Con experience now. Our tournament experience revolved around the Dungeon Crawl Classics tournaments every single year. So that would be the very first event that we would purchase. We'd be on the day of the opening for all the Gen Con events. We wanted to snag DCC because it would sell out easily within the first hour. They were gone. So we wanted to make sure to always be there to get it. So yeah,
especially back in the early days, the limiting factor to running a tournament like this is the number of game masters that you have. and back in year 1 and year 2, we didn't have many game masters, so that limited the amount of tables that we could run until we got up to speed on all that. And that takes time. It takes time to build up that. Now we have the Road Reavers, and we have a pool of people that we can pull from. But back then it was a lot harder to do that. So great. So how did you find out about the original 20? You just flipped through the catalog also, and you were like, oh, look at this. So
a friend of mine actually gave me a heads up. He said, here's a company that it's all the modules seem to be kind of like an homage to what the AD&D modules were, complete with some of the old artwork and encounters and things like that. So when I looked it up, I said, okay, I'm sold. It resonated, all the nostalgia. I said, well, I hope it lives up to it. And it did in spades. So again, we made sure to schedule DCC tournament. I stopped by the booth every single time, pick up new modules, see what was going on. So yeah, that was our first experience with the DCC tournament. And we played in lots of different tournaments, as that same group. And the Dungeon Crawl Classics was hands down the most organized, the point system, the encounters, everything was unique, and the puzzles with it. So we made sure to schedule it every single year.
Great, excellent. I think we've got a couple of pictures. Hopefully Thorin's going to pull those up, showing off some of the tourney tables. So give me some of your memorable encounters or thoughts on the pre-generated PCs for that first tournament. What do you remember to this day? I actually was your game master for the final round, so I actually have a couple of memories too. I'll see if you remember them, or if you remember them the same way.
Actually, I would love to hear some of your memories, because I was struggling. I was like, okay, this was 16 years ago, so I'm pulling up what were the things that really stood out, and to me, some of the unique encounters really stood out. Like I mentioned to you the. Am I allowed to do spoilers to this?
You can do spoilers. Okay. This module's been out for 16 years. If people really want to know what the encounters are.
That is true. Yeah. So the flesh golems that went undamaged unleashed the murder hornets. So things like that were just very unique encounters and creatures really stood out to me. But the sad part is when you're asked, hey, do you have any interesting tales that you could tell? The things that always stood out were things that we did wrong. So yes. I remember in the first round, the person who was playing the monk, he decided to enter a room. He got first initiative. He decided to enter the room before the rogue, who I was playing, got to actually check for traps. It's things like that that's basic, party dynamics that you need to pay attention to. And out of all the times to try that, the DCC tournament is really unforgiving when the team isn't working together. So of course he sets off traps. I entered trying to trap, right after him. So the trap got triggered on me, and it was confusion. So of course the one person who can disable the traps was confused, and he continued to plow through the rest of the room. But from that point forward, we're like, okay, that's not how we do things.
And that's so true. We were talking about this before our game yesterday about how, that's why the dice are important. And you remember a lot of time, you remember the nat 20s, but you remember most of the time the epic fails. You remember that time when you needed to roll a 10 and you rolled a 9 and and you plunged to your death or something. Those are the ones that you always remember. So I remember in running our final table, I remember a couple things about our final table. I remember this was a time tournament. We had 4 hours, and it's like people like you had to hold it. They didn't go to the bathroom. I mean, during this thing, it was like if you had to go to the bathroom, you just hold it until or you bring a Snapple bottle with you or something and under the table. But so it was very competitive. And I remember when I was running your group through, we actually got to our 4-hour time sum. We were fighting the mummy dragon, or we just got to the mummy dragon, and you guys were having such a good time. You guys we don't want to stop. And I remember saying, okay, we're going to stop right here. We took like a 10-minute break. I scored everything, turned the packet into the tournament organizer, my proxy. And then we continued with the module after that for like another hour. We're like, it was late Saturday night, I think. And it was like, I think after midnight at that point or close to it. And we just kept going. We finished off the mummy encounter, and it was great. I recall killing the monk again. I think you guys had issues with the monk player.
Yes.
So I remember there were some potions that were in the laboratory, and there was a recipe saying these were like super awesome potions, and the fight with the mummy dragon was not going particularly well, and you guys didn't identify what the potion was, and I remember the monk just quaffed the potion saying, I'm going to be superhuman now, and we're going to take this mummy dragon down. And of course it was a potion of lich transformation, and right in the rule book it said no saving throw, and I killed the monk. And let me tell you, it's very difficult to kill a 15th level monk in 3rd edition or 15th edition, 5th edition, because monks wreck every encounter. I mean, they really do. So
yeah, and I do recall us going through some team changes after the first year.
It's going through some team changes. Like, some people off the team. Wow. So this is some of the things you don't always hear about when you're when you're the game master and everything. That was great. So yeah, I was telling my players yesterday that it's like 5 of the 6 pre-generated characters were based off of characters in our home campaign, and I needed one more character. And I was like, wow, a monk would really fit the theme really well. So I was like, I'm going to add a monk. And let me tell you, monks ruin boss encounters. They ruin encounters, their movement, their special abilities. And I regret that choice 17 years later, because I still can't kill this 15th level monk in 5e. So absolutely crazy. So crazy. Great stories, Dan. So tell me about your next generation of gamers that you have coming up.
Yeah, so I have an 11-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter, and my son has been playing since he's 6, so he beat me by a full 2 years. So I started him really early. I think I gave him nightmares very early. I had a werewolf encounter, and for the next couple years he was terrified of werewolves. So it's probably not good maybe to start him that early, but yeah, he's been playing for a while now, and so he's really excited. The reason I invited him to actually participate in this, and he refused because he didn't want any spoilers.
Yes, I wanted him to come on too. I told Dan, I'm like, you got to have your son on. This is great. I ran into Dan, I think that was 2017 or maybe 18 when you would jump back in and you were doing the DCC tournament.
Yeah, actually, yeah, we had again part of the same group, but a friend of mine, Tim, and then his son and my son both played some together. So we played the DCC tournament again with our kids, and they were 8 and 7 at the time.
Yeah,
and I think that the DM was very kind to be working with us and playing with a 7 and 8-year-old, which may explain why the next year it was 13 and up. But he still talks about playing the DCC tournament.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool, and that's gonna cool when you guys get the either the DCC or the 5th edition version. You're gonna run them through it, right?
Yep. Him
Okay.
and some of his friends.
Wow, that won't cause any more nightmares at all. So that flesh golem with the choker arms and the spider, that won't be a problem at all.
Probably not.
He's used to it now. I mean, come on,
exactly. He's acclimated at this point.
Exactly. So, oh my God, that's great, Dan. Well, Dan, thank you so very much for coming on today. This is great. I mean, this is just like being at Gen Con and like hooking up at the bar at the Hyatt, at midnight and running into somebody that you gamed with, years ago and just like shooting the breeze. And oh my God, you've got kids now and your kids game. And I'm like, that's awesome. So we really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We will be back in 1 minute, folks. All right, we are back live, and I have a very special guest this time around, coming from two stories above my head, is my wife, Lisa, and best friend. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, everybody's probably like, why is Chris having his wife on the Crypt of the Devil Lich? Well, there's lots of reasons, and we're going to get to those in a second. So obviously Lisa is coming from central New Jersey, coming to snowy central New Jersey. We're getting a little bit of rain today, so it's nice that some of that snow's finally starting to go away. So a couple questions. Obviously, I know the answers to these questions, but obviously our viewers do not. But when did you start playing D&D?
So I actually started when I was 7 years old, and folks, you can go ahead and do the math, but that was in 1977 with the original D&D set that came in the beige box. My father saw it the previous year and thought, hey, this looks like fun. So he would run myself and my mom through some modules, and for me, this was actually my Barbie dolls. I used to generate characters and equip them from the equipment list and give them ion stones for their birthdays, and yeah. It was, I started young, actually even younger than you did, dear. So,
she certainly did. She beat me by several years.
So I've been playing for 43 years. I've played every single edition of D&D and quite a few of the variants, and emphasis on the player part of it. I've GM'd about a dozen times. I'm nowhere near as good as my husband, so please don't ask me to GM. And I don't know the rules as well. But I've also done a bit of writing as well. So I know you wanted to say something.
Yes. Well, great. So where do you play into this role of Crypt of the Devil Lich? What was your role back in 2004?
So we've been married for 27 years. So at the time that you wrote this, back in 2004, I came downstairs into the basement one day, and Chris had pieces of paper scattered everywhere on the floor. I mean, I couldn't, it was a little tricky to walk between. So I asked him, it's like, what is all this? And he explained to me that he was busy writing a new tournament module, and that he was busy trying to lay out the different rooms and figure out where it would all fit together. And he was saying, it's like, yeah, I still have a few rooms. And I'm like, okay, I don't know the rules as well as you do. And nowhere near as prolific, but I've written quite a few adventures for the RPGA, Role Playing Gamers Association, for those of you who might not have heard of that, and figured, okay, I can do a room. A room wouldn't be too bad. And as a player, a long-term player, I know what frustrates me. So when Chris was explaining, I'm like, could I design one of the rooms? And he said, yes. And so I said, okay, it's like, this could be fun.
Yeah, and we ended up with, ironically, and this was not planned, folks, with the encounter that Dan just mentioned with the hell wasp swarms and the flesh golem containers. That was actually the encounter that Lisa designed, and Thorne has a couple of pictures he's going to pull up here from the original handouts from the module. So and this was kind of funny, and we're going to get into this a little bit more, but so obviously your basis of this was to try and frustrate people and make a challenge for an encounter. How did you, what were you most pleased about with your encounter? You know, and you can spoil as much as you want. I don't think it's a bad thing. There's the artwork popping up.
Well, the first thing, as I said, is something that I knew as a player. It's twofold. I wanted a room that could realistically exist. I mean, Chalychia is, you know, this infamous super lich, and she's not going to be stupid, not anywhere close to it. First of all, you can't be a lich and be stupid. And she's going to produce something that she wants to give the characters some effort. I mean, this is her home they're walking through. So figured first off, it's got to be a realistic room. And what does every infamous Devil Lich need but a way to view the world? You know, she's stuck in her headquarters. She's got to be able to see what's going on, equivalent to our Google News or something. It's equivalent to Reuters. So she's got to have some scrying room. So I figured, okay, great. Gonna have a crystal ball, gonna lay it out, a room nice enough for a Devil Lich. So she's got her bone throne, she's got her gold inlay, nice and comfy. She's got her guardians, she's got tapestries in the room, you know, good place to sit for long periods of time. Not that we do any of that these days, right? And so that was a starting point. And then after that, I said, okay, well, when she was there and using it, it was just a scrying room, but what would she do to this room to make it a challenge for the characters when they came through? So when they enter the room, they see the big bone throne inlaid with lots of gold. They see the tapestry with platinum threaded through. And, you know, they see the crystal ball right in front of the throne. And then they see 4 golems, very obviously. So you walk into this room and you're thinking, oh, yeah, it's obvious. The throne and the crystal ball, that's your reward. You've got to overcome the monsters. But of course, having been through other rooms on the first level, and let me say, the first level is the hardest. Now, my room actually is not the hardest room in that first level. I'm going to say right now, the dark room, we've already mentioned those gelatinous cubes. Your player characters are not going to look at Jell-O the same way ever again. The reverse room, which is, you know, a lot of times you run out of time for, but that's also a really challenging room. But I put my room about 3rd on the first level. And so it's not what it appears. You know, you go in thinking, oh, you just got to get the ball, overcome the monsters, and we're out of here. Piece of cake. No. So you've got various ways, and I don't want to give away too much, but obviously we've already mentioned the hell wasps. Well, I generated a new monster using the, at the time, 3.5 rules, especially with in mind, you know, people like fire, especially against insects. That's not going to work so well.
Especially with a fire mage. So let's talk about the player characters a little bit too. So as I mentioned that we have 6 pre-generated characters, and back in the day when I had to create 6 pre-generated characters, it was pretty easy to say, oh, I'll just base them off of my original characters that we've had over the years. Well, 3 of them actually happen to be your characters. You want to tell everybody who your characters were? People could probably figure it out, but
yeah, and thank you for that, by the way, dear.
Yeah. Because people have been killing her characters off for 17 years, basically.
Yes, characters which were probably like the 2nd group I think we ever started. And so we started these characters at 1st level and built them up, I believe, to 11th level. So these were authentic characters and near and dear to my heart, unfortunately, I have to say. But Lady Varen was mine. Jinx was also mine, and Rin was from a later campaign, but she was also mine. So the paladin, the mage, and the archer. And I was thinking around while we were talking, so I don't know if you can see, probably not, but this was some artwork I had generated back in the original. I never did quite finish, but there's Varen. She was probably the most fully detailed back from that time frame. And so we built these characters up. And that's their personalities are exactly what we designed. So Jinx was very much a firebug, you know, not in your traditional wizard robes very often, because quite frankly, it's a pain going through a dungeon in a robe. I don't recommend it to anybody. I've never tried it personally. And, you know, and Varn was at that time when we generated 3.5, it was actually part of the rules that paladins didn't use missile weapons. It was an unfair advantage. So of course she doesn't have a missile weapon, which is a problem in this kind of module.
Yes, we specifically designed encounters where there's a lot of ranged combat, and a big part of it, we were talking about the flying dwarf earlier, is getting the paladin up to the fight, and so there's some specific encounters that make it hard for you to do that. You know, there's spells and that you can definitely do that. I just want to throw out there, we threw up a couple times, we put the image of Jinx, some artwork of Jinx in there on the stream. I didn't ask permission for that. That's some of the new artwork that's being commissioned for this 5th edition conversion. So Thorne's got it up there right now. So if anybody wants to know a good description of what Jinx would be, some people have said Tinkerbell with all black but shooting fire out of her hands and burning everything to pieces. I like to think of Jinx as Mr. B Natural, and if anybody gets that a reference there, obscure reference from the 90s, throw that in the chat, because I'd like to see if anybody understands what that one's all about. So, well, thank you very much for your time today, Lisa. I'll see you in 15 minutes probably, but we really appreciate you lending some of your experiences in your original encounter design and about your characters. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Joe's comment about, oh, one of our stretch goals, some more pre-gen characters, did make me wince.
Well, because you get a pile of them and you can go through them.
Talk about which characters. So
oh yeah. No, maybe they'll be generic. I don't know if we'll kill off any more of your characters. So thank you very much. And we are going to be back with our last guest in a moment. And we are back, Crypt of the Devil Lich live, our live stream at Spawn of Cyclops Con. We have our last very special guest, a very, very special guest in my opinion. I'd like to introduce everybody to my son, Alec Doyle. Alec, hello. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for the introduction, Chris. I am the son of Chris, who you are seeing right now.
You can call me Dad, that's fine.
Oh, come on. All right, fine, Dad.
Alec is 17 years old. I have to start off with this little bit of story. First of all, so he's obviously coming from central New Jersey too. He lives in my house still for a couple more months before I kick him out. No, not really. Anyway, so when I first began designing Crypt of the Devil Lich back in 2004, I had the honor and the pleasure of being a stay-at-home dad at that point. And Alec was 6 months old. And I was getting into some quite a bit of freelance work at that point because, you know, I was home. I'd given up my previous career. So he was 6 months old, and this is what's really cool in that. And I touched on this with Dan a little bit, and even Andy mentioned about gaming with his kids. In the last couple of months, I've had the honor of running my son Alec and Lisa through Crypt of the Devil Lich, the 5th edition version. So we're kind of coming full circle here. So this is a very exciting project that, you know, I helped create back in 2004, and now a whole nother generation of gamers are going to get to experience it, and that's awesome. And it's the same thing with working on the original Adventures Reincarnated, where we've gotten a chance to update some of the classics from the 70s and 80s, where that's like 2 and sometimes 3 generations of gamers that we've been able to kind of add that to. So I had to kind of set the stage there, Alec, and everything. So let's talk about when did you start playing D&D?
So I started playing D&D regularly, at least in sometime early 2016. So I've been playing for 5 years, which compared to all these other wonderful people on this um, live stream is like none at all. But and to be honest, I'm actually kind of ashamed of that. I should have been playing way earlier. This is a really fun game. But besides that fact, I have been playing for 5 years, but I still feel like this has been great. It's a great game, and I'm proud to have been playing it for 5 years, even if it is only 5 years.
Yeah, and kind of cool that your old man is actually working in the industry, huh? And giving you that kind of that
Yeah.
inside track on everything.
Oh, it's
Um,
definitely an advantage. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So those of you, my son actually has the pleasure, actually has what I would consider to be a celebrity game master. That's not me. But his game master is actually Professor Dungeon Master. We did a stream with him a couple of weeks ago on our Talking TSR show. And he's a very popular YouTuber. And it just dumb luck ended up that my son was in a church group and he became the game master. And the next thing we know, Alec is actually playing with somebody who's been gaming longer than me, actually, not named my wife, and actually is got a lot more followers than I do. So that's kind of cool as well. So let's talk about this 5th edition playtest that you did, Alec. What was the character that you were playing?
So the character that I was playing during the playtest was Rin of Briarwood, aka the Archer, which was talked about sometime before this. They are a half-elf, drow-hating being that specializes in shooting things with bows and shooting things with bows.
Yeah.
So they are commonly using range attacks because they shoot things with bows. And one of their big things is the sharpshooter feat, which allows them to sacrifice 5 to hit and bonus for plus 10 damage, which is incredibly good if used correctly. So there's a lot of strategy which comes in on when you should use sharpshooter and when not to. And although compared to some other spellcasters and whatnot, that may not sound like much strategy, Rin can cast a few spells and does have spells. Yeah, I kind of just said that. But she does cast spells as well. But main strategy comes to what should I shoot, where should I shoot, how should I shoot, and shoot.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about what's the other big thing that Rin is kind of really good at.
Rin
Complements other characters well.
Rin is kind of the logical wielder for the Sword of True Death, which is a sword that is connected to the plot of Crypt of the Devil Lich and is very important in the module itself. And as the logical wielder of True Death, she has a really important role in the module. And I mean, if she comes up to the Devil Lich with a sword, Chalychia is kind of part drow, so heck yeah, she's gonna try to slay that Devil Lich. She made it her personal goal. She hates drow.
Yeah, there you go. For those of you who don't know, Chalychia is half drow, half fiend. That's kind of where that all comes in. So, all right. So give me a story from the playtest. One of the memorable encounters, either good or bad, that you remember from a couple of weeks ago.
Oh boy. So the first.
Try and relive your
yeah.
horrors here. Reliving your horrors.
Yeah, this one was probably the most memorable. So we're on the first level, which is proclaimed to be the hardest level in the module. And we just come across this big old pit. Huh, kind of interesting little pit here. Okay, but we can easily just fly on over that, like maybe with a flying dwarf or something. Yeah, that'd be pretty easy. So we go and fly over the pit and we don't think much about it. So we're later going on through the module and we get this little clue. And this little clue is like saying, hey, you got to go down. Like there's more levels to this place. And we're like, oh, wow, where could we go down? Oh, hey, there was a big old pit just a few rooms back. What if we went and jumped in it? And that decision, which, by the way, I kind of made myself, led to the death of 2 characters, one of which was mine. And yeah, that was fun getting smushed in between 2 gelatinous cubes.
Yeah. And what was the worst part about it?
The worst part
the
is
environment.
that
You couldn't.
Yeah, we couldn't see or hear what was going on in there. So
That
everyone
was
else at the top who wasn't jumping into the pit like fools were like, well, they're not screaming in pain and nothing really, we don't see anything bad, so it must be all happy fine in there, and they've gone to the next level and we're progressing with the module. Whoopity-doo. Totally nothing bad going on and nothing bad going down there.
Yeah, that. It's funny. That encounter did not seem to be a really impressive encounter when I remember putting the module together. But for some reason, when running it, when you take away the player's ability to hear and see, and essentially keep them in the dark, as the worst, they always say that your worst fear is the fear of the unknown, and you take away sound and all kinds of vision, and there was like no way the darkness was caused by an artifact, so it was like it was very difficult to actually dispel. So yeah, it had such an effect on the players, and I think they're never going to forget that encounter. Exactly.
We're
So
not looking at Jello the same. We're not looking at Jello the
never.
same.
A couple people have said that. No, people have sworn off all Jello after playing this module. So let that be a warning to everybody. So one of the side effects of the pandemic is as a family now, we go for a lot more walks. And Alec and I, while we were going through this playtest, we would often go for a walk and we would talk about the playtest session that we had. And we would go over, and Alec actually was instrumental to helping me out. He was my soundboard. I'd be like, okay, I need, you've been through this encounter. How can we make this encounter a little bit better from 5th edition standpoint? So we would go, and I'm telling you, the neighbors must think we're nuts because, we're just walking around and we're just talking out loud, and they're hearing all this stuff about Devil Lich and, gelatinous cubes and, hell wasp swarms and everything. So this was great. We got a chance to actually work through some of these things, and it's a great, very therapeutic process to actually talk out and encounter out loud. So and maybe you can give us a little quick story on that or something about one of the encounters you helped out with.
Yes. So during one of our walks that we did, we were addressing one of the problems, which actually, well, I would say problems in quotation marks, but with one of the rooms, actually was mentioned beforehand, the scrying room. So in this room, back in 3.5 edition, Jinx, one of the magic casters, the main magic caster, or our fire mage, could cast Fly and Telekinesis once per tournament round, and those two spells basically acted as get out of jail free cards. Problem is, with 5th edition, with the introduction of spell slots and just generally spell slots being spell slots, now you can cast the same spell multiple times. And this led to a big problem where several things could just be outright avoided with spells like Fly and Telekinesis. So when addressing the problem with that room, well, let's just say you attempt something like that, there might be a pointy surprise in your future.
Yeah, that's like a good way to put it without spoiling it all. You guys are going to have to read the module if you want to find out, or go through it. Better yet, play the module if you want to.
Yeah, go ahead. See that pointy surprise in full D&D fashion as it impales your characters.
Excellent. So, well, I got to thank you, Alec, for spending a couple minutes here. This has been great. You don't know how important this is for me to actually have you sharing this experience with me. Someday when you're older, you'll understand why this is really, really important. But this has been great that I've been able to share this with family. Obviously, the pandemic has sucked the last year, but there's a couple things that I'm always going to remember. And one of the things I'm going to remember during the pandemic is A, joining Goodman Games full time, and B, getting to run like 6 sessions of Crypt of the Devil Lich with 5th edition rules over Zoom over Roll20, I should say, with a bunch of friends that I haven't gamed with much, and also family, and I'm never going to forget those memories. And that's really what this is all about, playing role-playing games and making memories. So sit tight there for a couple minutes, Alec. I'm just going to wrap up the show here. So everybody, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I am looking at the chat and everything. Procrastinate, you are dead on, exactly where the Mr. B Natural quote came in there. Yes, we can't wait for Temple of Elemental Evil also. That is coming soon. And yeah, paladins rule and are complicated, so especially with the lack of ranged weapons. So So if everybody is interested in Crypt of the Devil Lich, please go check our Kickstarter out. It's live now. It's going to be live for the next couple of weeks. Like I said, we're just about smashed through all of our stretch goals. So in another couple of days, probably give us a day or two after the convention. We've kind of a little busy here. We will get some new stretch goals up, and then we'll see just how far we can take this. A couple of other announcements. I would like to remind everybody that we have a very special episode of Talking TSR tomorrow, Sunday at 3 p.m. Rick and I will be doing a very deep dive into the Tome of Horrors and some of the parallels with Crypt of the Devil Lich, but mostly we are going to be focusing on Tome of Horrors, one of Rick's favorite modules. Not one of my favorite modules, believe it or not, and I'll go into some detail tomorrow about that. We're going to do at least one more Crypt of the Devil Lich live stream. That is going to be scheduled for March 7th, Sunday, March 7th. That's a week from tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Alex over at 20 Sides to Every Story is actually going to interview myself and Tim. Tim is our 5th edition editor, and we're going to do a pretty deep dive, not so much in the history that we talked about today, but we're going to talk more specifically about the 5th edition conversion and probably the DCC conversion as well. So please consider joining us. Then we're also trying to set up one more live stream that we might do the week after that. But we'll have some more details on that if you follow along on the Kickstarter. So thank you everybody for tuning in today. My game name again is Chris Doyle, and I will be seeing you guys around Gather Town later on at the convention. Bye all.